All right, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. I am back in the saddle, and it is the end of the year, which means it's time for our annual movie special with entertainment writer Christian Toto. This is, I believe, our fourth annual movies special, which easily makes this the longest running tradition on our show. All year long, we discuss policy, government corruptions, the machinations of the global elites, and so on. But once a year, Jim and I like to dedicate an episode to another passion of ours, watching movies and talking about the film industry itself. And we have quite a year to discuss, from massive box office bombs to Disney in turmoil to writers and actors strikes. We're going to attempt to talk about all of this and more on this very special episode of the In the Tank podcast. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, except for last week, I am your host, Donald Kendal. And joining me today, I've got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing great, working remote from Casa de Lakely in an undisclosed location in northern Illinois. And this morning I woke up and realized I was using this 2004 vote C-SPAN. I was a guest on C-SPAN. Now it's 20 years ago to talk about well, George Bush was president then. And so I was thinking, well, this mug has made it for 20 years, and soon it'll be in retirement age. So
all right, very nice, very nice. Also joining us, we have Christian Toto, entertainment writer. Good sir, I mentioned that you are, this is the fourth year in a row on the show. We've tried to do little annual things, traditions, look back type of stuff, but it's never made it past 2 years. You should feel so honored that this is the fourth year in a row that we are doing this special episode.
I am honored, though. I'm ready for number 5. I want a gift, some sort of like a jacket, a mug. I want Jim's mug. That's what I.
That's right. On the 5th episode, we're gonna send you that 2004 vote C-SPAN mug. That's what you have waiting for you in your fifth episode. You've always got different stuff going on. I know that Hollywood and Toto podcast. You got your website. What? Just right off the bat, kind of pitch everything you've got going on. We don't have to wait till the end of the episode for you to do your pitches.
Yeah, I'm putting a lot of effort into the Hollywood in Toto podcast. It interviews a lot of comedians. People have been canceled. Thought makers, I guess you could say. People who just maybe don't agree with the groupthink that's going on in the entertainment industry right now. And we're going video. I'll be joining you guys. Right now, it's just audio only, but I have worked out a studio. It is a work in progress, but it's nearly done. So that'll be coming in a few weeks. And then 2024 is the 10-year anniversary of HollywoodandToto.com, which is scary. And we're all getting older, obviously. And I'm excited about that. And also, I just started working as a freelancer, Blaze. So you'll see my stories at theblaze.com.
Fantastic. All right. Definitely going to look out for that. So a lot of stuff to go over, as I kind of mentioned in the introduction of this episode. But before we get going, I do have a prepared statement. So I just want to start off with this. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, we gather here today to remember and celebrate the life of some truly extraordinary film franchises. Whether it's Indiana Jones or Star Wars or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, these franchises have touched the hearts of millions around the world, leaving an indelible mark on our lives. The wonder, the action, the adventure of these movies created a warmth that will linger forever in our memories. As we bid farewell to these franchises, let us carry forward the lessons they bestowed upon us, the importance of love, empathy, the cherishing each other's precious moments. Their impact will endure in the stories we share, the values we uphold, and the love we continue to nurture in their memory. In honor of these franchises' legacy, we should find solace in knowing that their spirit will forever live on in our hearts, even when they continue to churn out terrible, terrible, terrible sequels in the names of these franchises. So, Jim, I mean, obviously that is my dig at the idea that all of these beloved franchises that we've been, that have been in our lives for the past however many years seem to be all going down the tubes. And I think 2023 might be the year that marks the end of that little tombstone for some of these franchises. I mean, we can get into it, but when we were talking about doing this episode, I mean, this was kind of mostly what our thoughts were going around, whether it's Star Wars, Indiana Jones for sure, MCU, they all seem to be either on life support or, one foot in the grave completely. What are your take on this before we get into it?
Well, yeah, I mean, we do talk about this when we're having lunch in the kitchen at Heartland headquarters, or when we pop into each other's offices. But to kind of lighten the mood, you talk about pop culture, and that's why we're so glad to have Christian Toto on, because he's one of the growing. Actually, he was a pioneer in being able to examine and write about pop culture from a non-leftist perspective, and he's been able to watch the entertainment media world become increasingly ideological, and that's what Hollywood is become even more so. I mean, the idea that Hollywood didn't lean left. I mean, look at the movies of the 1970s. When new cinema was beginning and the old studio systems were starting to fall away. Leftists and hippies and all those dirty hippies all took over Hollywood and tried to propagandize, but at least they had a goal to entertain. And now what we have seen with these franchises in pop culture, these movie franchises like Indiana Jones, regular listeners of this podcast may think it's kind of silly that we're doing a show on this. But I really believe that pop culture is culture. Pop culture, as Andrew Breitbart, of course, famously said, politics is downstream from culture. And American culture is defined as much by the highbrow stuff. In fact, it's defined more by the so-called middlebrow and lowbrow stuff, like what Hollywood turns out, like movies, like entertainment that we used to enjoy together and see together as a community and talk about it. It was something that bound us together. And now it's all divisive. I mean, the reason Christian Toto's latest book is called Virtue Bombs: How Hollywood Got Woke and Lost Its Soul. And that's exactly right. That thesis has been proven true, that Hollywood is no longer interested in entertaining. It is interested in social change. It's interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's all tied up into how films are financed, and studios can even get loans to make movies. It's tied into what movies are eligible for the Oscars. I mean, so a leftist ideological bent has ruined and destroyed things that we used to enjoy together as a common culture. And I think it's important to talk about it. And actually, the good news, as we will get to here about in 2023, is the death of all of these franchises. The audience did not so much kill these franchises off as the people that were put in trust of those franchises committed suicide.
Well, Christian, I want to ask you specifically about some of these, box office bombs and the performance of some of these movies that pertain to these franchises. But speak to that thesis a little bit. That's kind of core to your book. I mean, is Jim overstating this, or is he kind of on point?
Mostly on point. I don't think things are dead, but they are suffering. I think there's a financial hit that's taken place, and we're seeing that with a lot of these talks of different mergers going on, like Time Warner with Warner Brothers Discovery and Paramount possibly joining forces. They're not doing it for kicks. They're doing it because each is suffering in a certain way, and if they join forces and kind of marry their different content libraries, they may be able to get more people to subscribe to their services. But yeah, the problem is that when you focus on diversity, when you focus on messaging, when you focus on all these different elements, storytelling almost always takes a back seat. And we're seeing that in the product that comes out. And listen, there are some franchises that have just worn out their welcome. Fast X, it's done. We've seen 10 movies. Some were really enjoyable. They've all been dumb. We don't mind that. But, at some point, that formula just wears out. And it's just not, there's not enough creativity to bring it back from the grave. And then you have the Indiana Jones movie where you have a very old movie star. You've got a story that isn't very compelling. And then you've got a female heroine who's really not very likable and is inserting herself in ways that diminish our hero, the guy that we've loved for, 4 decades. So, all these different things are coming into play. But I think what you're seeing the last year is Hollywood has been playing almost with fake money for a while.
Mm.
Now the bleep has hit the fan, and they're cutting costs. They're canceling shows that have not performed well. They're erasing content that was uber woke and didn't draw a crowd. So I think things are getting real behind the scenes in Hollywood. I think that's why we're seeing some of the actions taking place right now.
Yeah, it seems very interesting because I think when we did our first episode, we were kind of talking about the streaming services. I think it was when Mandalorian was first on the scene, and we were talking about it maybe this streaming service, especially in the light of COVID, are the streaming services, is that kind of the future of all of this? And I wonder if that's kind of been reassessed in the last year or so, because Star Wars and the MCU specifically, it's like their lifeblood, especially Star Wars, was on these streaming services. But from the sounds of it, it doesn't seem like everyone is, staying up to date on every one of these new Marvel shows that are coming out. And some of them you need to know to understand what's going on in some of these movies. And Star Wars, they haven't even put out a movie since the Rise of Skywalker. So, and also coupled that with the idea that they knew that they were going to bleed money on these streaming services because, they just wanted a bigger market share, right? So if we have to lose money for a few years to gain market share, that's fine. But it just seems like all of that is kind of falling apart. So how do you think that's going to play out? And anything to add to that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think streaming is still the future. I think cable appears to be the past, but it's about how they could make enough money to make it a sustainable landscape. I mean, I think Netflix appears to be doing well, or at least better than the other platforms. Disney Plus is suffering, Max is suffering. All these different platforms just not making ends meet. And the problem is that you've got to make new show after new show after new show, and the quality has to be movie level. When I was growing up, a TV show looked like a TV show. It cost a fraction of what a movie cost. Now they're fairly comparable. So, you can't just keep dumping money into it. And then you've got subscribers who say, well, I'm going to sign on for Paramount Plus for a month. I'll watch Tulsa King, and then I'm gone. And maybe I'll come back in 6 months. So, that's not going to really sustain the audience they need to pay for all the programming. And now we're seeing Amazon Prime, which I've been a subscriber for quite a while. I don't know when the exact date is, but very soon you're going to have ads on the platform, which they haven't had before. And you're going to have to pay, I think it's about $2 or $3 more to get rid of those ads. So that isn't good. Will that hurt their subscriber base? Will people sign away? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, obviously Amazon has a lot of different perks to it besides the programming, but yeah, they're feeling the pinch. You can't just put out garbage. You can't just keep putting out the woke stuff. They realize that there's a problem there. And the next few years will be fascinating. And I still hope that the consumer will come out on top, but I'm not 100% sure, because we could be trading out the cable bill and trading in the streaming bill. Right. And if Max is suddenly $30, $40, $50, and then, Netflix is expensive too, then it's going to be fairly comparable. We don't want to see that happen again.
Yeah, because all right, so Jim, you did a bunch of number crunching. I already see your little table over there, but because I think that this almost goes beyond, and I'll get your opinion on this, Jim, while you talk about your chart. But this almost goes beyond some of this accusations of something being woke. I mean, Christian Toto, you mentioned the Fast X movies. I mean, I haven't watched any of those movies since the first one. Are those accused of being woke? I'm not entirely sure that they are.
No, not at all. Matter of fact, they are diverse, they are entertaining, but they're not woke. They don't focus on the diversity.
Right.
It just so happens to have people from a lot of different ethnic backgrounds
Sure.
who work together, and they pal around with each other, and they save the day. But they don't lecture. There's no messaging there. It's all about fun, adrenaline, and excitement. So That's been the exception. I just think as a story, there's only so many times it can go through those machinations.
Right, but
cars jumping off cliffs and things like that.
Well, how many movie series have 10 editions of it besides James Bond? I mean, those are a different story each time, right? But
it's a minor miracle they've been able to sustain it this long. But the cracks are showing, obviously.
Well, it just seems like every franchise is kind of running into this. I mean, the big three that I mentioned at the top of the podcast, Star Wars, they haven't put out a movie in a while. They're just doing streaming service stuff. Indiana Jones is dead. Like the whole thing has been, they had plans for shows and, continuing the story and all of that. That's all been scrapped. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is on life support after the Marvels and some of the other movies that have come out. But you mentioned the Fast and Furious movies. Transformers was one that you can pretty much count on making $1 billion because of international markets and all of that. That latest movie didn't do very well. So it seems like every franchise is kind of hitting a wall right now. And I would think that it was indicative of the entire Hollywood scene, the entire box office scene, if it weren't for a couple of movies. One of them being Avatar, that made almost $2 billion. Did it make over $2 billion? Something like that.
Some crazy figure.
$2 billion. Oppenheimer did really well, and then Barbie did extremely well, and Mario. I think those are like the four exceptions. Everything else underperformed. But Jim, you started putting together a spreadsheet, so why don't you run us through some of your findings here?
Yeah, well, when we wanted to invite Christian on again a few weeks ago, sent out an email. I just off the top of my head, just the string of absolute financial box office bombs put out by Disney / Marvel / Lucasfilm in 2023. It was just remarkable. If you had asked Christian a year ago, will Disney put out a single movie that makes a profit? He would have said, of course. They'll probably put out 10. Well, it turns out that they put out almost zero. And I have it in the chart with people that are watching on the video can see, and these are actually pretty generous in my estimations. Some of them, as far as the production budget is concerned and the marketing budget, a lot of the production budgets that are reported by the studios are fake, and they're fake on the low end. But even granting very generously how much each of these things cost, the movie Wish, which was panned by critics and rejected by audiences, lost by this estimation about $228 million. And again, the purpose of a studio putting out a movie, especially Disney, is to make gobs and gobs of money. It is not to break even. It is not to make a little bit, a few $1 million. It's to make several $100 million per movie. And one after the other, Disney's Wish lost $228 million. Little Mermaid, the some call woke, everything has to be race swapped or gender swapped, and they did it with Little Mermaid. That lost $165 million. Ant-Man and the Wasp lost at least $118 million. And again, emailing Christian about this, just kind of off the top of my head, Disney, Marvel, and Lucasfilm, they kept breaking their own record every couple of months for the biggest box office bombs of all time. It's mind-blowing. And that's why I think 2023 is going to be known as the year that Hollywood was finally smacked back into reality and to get back to its job, which is not to lecture their audience, which is not to enact social change, but to actually entertain people and to give people something to that's positive and that they can get around. And no matter what your politics are, you can enjoy and talk about. I mean, that was kind of one of the unifying factors of American culture, was that it didn't matter what your politics were. If you liked Godzilla -1, you could talk about it and how much you liked it, for instance. And you can't do that anymore. But the idea, so just to wrap that up, I mean, you go through Wish, Little Mermaid, Ant-Man, the Marvels lost $325 million. The only two, Elemental lost at least $100 million. Indiana Jones 5 lost $300 million at least. Haunted Mansion, which people don't even remember, they made a Haunted Mansion remake this year. It was in it was in theaters for about 4 days, and it was dumb. That lost 200. How do you lose $200 million on a movie called Haunted Mansion? It's ridiculous. But between all of them, Marvel and Lucasfilm and Disney lost 1.3, according to my calculations, $1.3 billion. And even Warner Brothers, there's talks now Warner Brothers might merge with Paramount because just to survive, because they're both losing so much money. But Warner itself lost $786 million. And the two big studios that have kept Hollywood afloat for like a decade, that have made the most profits of any studios anywhere, for more than a decade, before COVID, that is, combined lost $2 billion. This is fantastic news, because this means, it's like the old quote from Margaret Thatcher about socialism. Eventually you run out of other people's money. That's why socialism failed. And eventually these big studios run out of their own money, because they keep throwing money into a huge pit of garbage. And in fact, it would probably be better for these studios to have just piled that money like the Joker and set it on fire, because at least they would stay warm for a couple hours. Instead, this was a complete waste of time. And Disney's stock is half what it was 2 years ago. This is good to see. This is called the market working, fellas, I think.
Well, Christian, I got a couple of questions for you based on all of Jim's statements there. One of them, is this unprecedented? I mean, like, not only is it just like these, I mentioned to Jim right before we went live, like, this isn't just like a box office bomb. These are like box office carpet bombing, like, throughout the year. Like, is this unprecedented? And not only the losses when it comes to these movies, but also some of the things that like the studios have been doing. Like, we know that WB or whatever, DC, whatever is the parent company of all of that stuff, they had a movie done called Batgirl, Batwoman or something, and they're just like, you know what, we're just gonna put that in the garbage can.
Never mind.
Or like that Willow show, right? Like a nice reboot, a legacy character from so long ago. We're gonna make a whole show about it, put it on our streaming service. You know what? We're just gonna put that in the garbage can. It's just like, do studios do this? Like, is this unprecedented?
It feels new. I'm not a historian as far as the economics of Hollywood, but I just think the numbers are so big today that it seems like it couldn't have happened 20, 30 years ago. Maybe if you kind of, change the scales based on inflation, things like that. But I think that it's sobering to think that a company like Disney could suffer body blow after body blow after body blow, can watch their stocks just sink to the bottom and lose all that money. And they're still fine. They're still a mega studio to be reckoned with. I find that fascinating on some level. Obviously, there's other income streams coming in that's gonna compensate that. But you don't just lose all that money and think, oh well, 2024 is a new year. Marching on. I do think what we're looking at here, when we talk about woke, we talk about diversity, all these different measures. Now, again, diversity on paper, there's nothing wrong with diversity, but we know what's going on. It's diversity first and foremost, pushing aside talented people to say, okay, we need to fill these quotas. That's where you get into issues. But I think there's such a religious fervor behind the scenes at Disney Inc. that I don't know what will teach them the lesson. I don't think they change their focus. I just don't. I don't think they're going to say, we're guys and gals, we're doing this wrong. We need to kind of focus on X and Y and not Z. I don't think that happens. I think when you have that ideology, it's so entrenched that you just don't change. And to get slightly political, you think about what's happening across the country. There's crime soaring. And in Chicago, we had a fairly recent election. You had the mayor who was in charge of a city just awash with crime, and they voted in a softer on crime politician. That's ideology. That's not common sense. And I think that's what you're seeing at Disney. I don't think there's big changes afoot at Disney. I think it's full steam ahead. I don't think they're going to change.
Do you put any stock into some of the recent quotes from Disney CEO Bob Iger, where he was talking about... Yeah, because he had some quotes, just for context for people listening. He had some quotes talking about how, we need to get back to the basics. The movie making teams have been too focused on messaging and certain things like that people on the other side of the ideological spectrum were all in a panic that he's bending to the reactionary on the right that are calling everything woke. You don't put much stock into those comments?
I don't until I see the changes. And I'll mention one little item in recent weeks, which I think indicates that he's full of it, is that Disney pulled their advertising off of X. And they did it because they hate Elon Musk and they hate free speech. They didn't do it for any other reason. There's bad things happening in a lot of social media platforms. It's just the nature of the beast, on Instagram, on Facebook, on X, you name it. But that was a blatantly political move made by Iger and company. And when you see things like that, you're thinking, okay, when he says, I want to quiet the noise in the culture war, I don't believe him. So I want to see proof, and things like that show me I don't think even he believes it. So I think he's saying what he thinks he needs to say, but until things change, I'm not buying it.
Yeah, one of the topics that we wanted to get to that's in the show notes is I swear to God, Donnie, I'm not skipping ahead, but because we'll get to it in more detail. But the idea that these people, oh my gosh, I said it, these ideological people, frankly, just don't have the talent, and they certainly don't have the wisdom to know how to make good, broad appeal entertainment. They simply don't know how to do it. It'd be like putting, any of us in charge of a gourmet kitchen in one of the great Chicago restaurants. We may be able to cook, a nice ham and eggs, but we can't create the kind of food that the audience would expect. And I think these studios, I know, Christian, you're a fan and a friend, I guess, because he's on your latest Hollywood and Toto podcast, The Critical Drinker, who has over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. I never miss his videos. I highly urge anyone who's interested in any of these topics to subscribe, not just to Christian Toto's stuff on YouTube, but The Critical Drinker. He says a couple of things that have always stuck with me, because he's in the industry himself now. He's a fiction author, writes thrillers and that sort of thing. And actually, a small film is going to be made out of one of his books, which is pretty exciting. I look forward to seeing it. But he reminded me years ago, listening to his videos, that it takes a long time to turn these ships around. Like, if you think that Disney got the message to stop going woke because we're going broke, well, they may have got the message. And if they stopped doing that nonsense right now, it would take 3 years at least to see the end product of something that wasn't woke. And so it's going to keep going on. These people are going to keep losing money. And, that's why we're seeing alternate entertainment, independent entertainment, a small studio like A24 that makes very interesting movies, some good, some bad, but they're always pretty interesting. And they're a lot more creative than what you get from the major studios. I mentioned Godzilla -1, which I saw the day after Christmas. Really enjoyed it because it was really nothing like anything that you get from Hollywood and American entertainment today. And it actually kind of reminded me of the success of Squid Game, which was on Netflix. That was a huge global phenomenon. What was it, a year or two ago? And it was a series, a show, spoken entirely in Korean, and you had to read the subtitles, but it captivated many Americans across the country. So I think what you're seeing is that you're going to see a Hollywood that is incapable of a quick turnaround. It's a huge ship, and is going to take a while. And that void is going to be filled with something. It's filled with people watching YouTube streams, content creators on independent media outlets, and more foreign films are going to be more mainstream, like Godzilla -1 has been this year.
A couple of quick thoughts. One is, I think YouTube, I mean, it's super anecdotal because it's just me. But when I go to bed at night, often I don't watch Netflix or Amazon Prime. I watch YouTube. I'll watch The Critical Drinker. I'll watch my favorite cooking channel show. I mean, it has so much content. It's such a variety. It's so interesting. It's often very well produced. And that's a real threat to, I think, Hollywood Inc. Also, one of the things I'd love to see Disney do, if they're smart, is go hire Paul King. And if you don't know who Paul King is, he directed two of the most charming films I've seen in the last decade, the Paddington movies. They are adorable. They're sweet. They're funny. It's just heartwarming. And he also just directed Wonka, which has got legs at the box office. I was deeply cynical of the whole project. Oh, we need a prequel to the Wonka movies. You can't just recast Gene Wilder. It's impossible. Yes, it is impossible. But the movie is sweet. It's positive. It's uplifting. It's message-free in the best of ways. And it's not pushing an agenda. It's saying, believe in yourself, try harder, reach for your dreams. No one disagrees with those things, I don't think. So, I think that Disney, you're right, it'll take a while to turn the ship around if they really want to do that. But I think you can see some minor signs that they're interested in doing just that, hiring a Paul King or just, other messaging. Well, I'll have to wait and see. But, things can be done. Or, I don't know the director's name of Godzilla -1. Boy, if I'm Hollywood Inc., I'd be signing that guy to a contract like that. That is a wonderful film. My wife liked Godzilla -1. She's never seen a Godzilla movie. She's never watched Star Wars. She doesn't like genre stuff, doesn't like science fiction. And she loved it because it was a good story. We need that again. That's why it's resonating with people. You can just, like you said, Squid Game, Top Gun Maverick, Godzilla minus one. We're still hungry for great stories. We're just not getting enough.
Right. Yeah. Well, just real quick on the Wonka thing, because I do know somebody that thinks that the Johnny Depp Wonka movie was better than the original, but that's just one person. But
That's
Andy, you know
not
who I'm
me.
talking about. You just have to think about it. So there's a couple of things in both your and Jim's latest comments that I want to kind of pick your brain on too,
Yeah.
which is the idea of the independent media and just kind of the landscape that that the whole media production industry is a part of, right? Because, and I've mentioned this in conversations before with people that, you know, you go back 50 plus years and there's a handful of channels and everyone's watching the same sort of stuff, and you know, the movies that are out there, they're all trying to appeal to the most broad market possible, right? You want everyone to watch your stuff, so you're going to make it appeal to everybody. But now, especially, you know, increasing even more drastically than ever in the past couple of years, you've got this really fractured way of getting content out there. There's a million TV channels. There, when it comes to YouTube, there's a billion YouTube channels. There's 50 different streaming channels. You know, all of these things. There's, you know, they probably represent tiny slivers of the general pie, but there's so many tiny slivers that the content that I see being put out there isn't necessarily wanting to appeal to all general audiences. You know, like, was Batgirl trying to get Jim in the movie seats? Probably not. It's probably trying to appeal to, you know, some 15 to 29-year-old female, you know, demographic or something like that. And I just wonder, like, if that's the way that they want to go, well, is that the way that they want to go, where they're making content specifically targeting certain demographics? And B, if that is the way that they want to go, then you got to ditch this idea of putting a $200 million budget behind some of these projects. If Batgirl costs them more than $50 million, they're out of their minds. But your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think they want it both ways. They want to get the mainstream mass audience because that gives you the most bang for your buck. Literally, you get more money, and that's where the blockbusters come in. You know, they didn't make the Flash to be a niche product. They wanted it to be a huge product, and of course, it failed. But also, you'll see things like The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Now, they aggressively alienate half the country, but they get enough of the liberal half of the country to be successful, and they're okay with that. So there's two different platforms here. I just think in many cases, not all, but in many cases, they're just leaving wads of money on the table. You know, why should Saturday Night Live be a niche product? It's got a beloved legacy. It's got the potential to hit both the left and the right. It did so for years, and now it's not. They have driven away half their customer base. That doesn't seem to make sense to me. Maybe The Late Show, it makes more sense. They want to be an ideological platform. And go for it, I guess. I don't think that makes as much sense as well either. But, you know, you just can't do it both ways. So if you're going to throw $300 million into a project and you make it woke, then you're chasing away a lot of people. So they don't seem to realize that. You know, the Dial of Destiny, which was, I thought was watchable, it was mediocre. But the Phoebe Waller-Bridges character was alienating. She was
Repellent
annoying.
is a word I use for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But also she was dressing down our iconic Indiana Jones. There's one sequence in the movie where basically she's rescuing him and he's like, you know, oh, come get me, Phoebe. I mean, is that what you want to go see an Indiana Jones movie for? I don't think so. I mean, you could always put out any story you want, but it just, I feel like you're messing with the DNA of these franchises when you do that. So, but that's what they want to do.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
go ahead, Jim.
it's just this it's if you add wokeness and I think really a lack of just basic talent in many of these writers' rooms with this, you know, I went to Oberlin and so I need to deconstruct reality and deconstruct. So basically, we got a deconstructed Indiana Jones who was a pathetic shell of his former self. Actually displayed none really of the personality traits that made America fall in love with that character, and gave all of those good traits unearned to a repellent character in the character played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I don't even remember the name of the character's name because all I remember is that it's the actress's name is Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and it was such a big deal. And so this is, you know, we can get into your best and worst of 2023. And maybe we can get more into the fact that if you just put the ideology aside,
Mhm.
that modern Hollywood does not have, these studios are not staffed with people who actually have talent. I guarantee you, the Jessica Gao and her writer's room for She-Hulk, they thought they did something great. They loved She-Hulk, but nobody else did. It was terrible. I started hate watching it. I watched the first couple of episodes because your friend Chris Gore actually gave it good reviews for the first few episodes. So I gave it a
Wow.
shot. I think I made it through 3 episodes, and then I just started hate watching it, and I enjoyed it just because it was so bad.
I actually did the
These people
exact
think they're
same
doing
thing.
good stuff.
I hate watch that show, and I almost never do it. I was so curious about how bad it was that it kept me watching the shows. I think, oh my gosh, is this really happening? Is this, I mean, is this an actual effort? And I couldn't believe it. And then toward the end of season 1, I thought it got maybe microscopically better, but yeah, it was absolutely terrible. But you know, it is what I cover a lot at my site is sort of how dumb Hollywood can be. And to give an example, the Dial of Destiny trailer. There were multiple trailers before it came out. One of them had a line from Phoebe about capitalism.
Yeah.
Like, I stole it from you, you stole it from me. And she says, that's called capitalism. And I'm thinking, okay, you can put that in a movie. That's perfectly fine. No big deal. But if you're trying to attract a mass audience, and you know that half of America is going to recoil at that line and think, oh, there's Hollywood being Hollywood again and being uber liberal. Why would you put that in the trailer? Why would you highlight that? It's just plain dumb. It's like Rachel Zegler, who's making Snow White, saying to the press, oh, have you seen Snow White, the original movie? It stinks. It's old. We're not doing anything like that. I mean, what was she thinking? And why wasn't she hauled into Disney Inc. and say, Rachel, sweetheart, darling, we love you. We're loving the dailies on the movie, but can you tone down the aggressive antics about our beloved film that we're trying to replicate? Not a good strategy, but they won't do that.
Why won't they do that, Christian? That's really the question. Why won't they do it? I think it's because they agree with her, and there isn't anybody with the talent or the wisdom to know how to do a proper marketing campaign for an iconic movie remake like Snow White.
There's got to be a terrible echo chamber that they're all stuck in, because, like, you know, that Phoebe Waller-Bridge, right? That line that you mentioned, the capitalism thing in the trailer, it was pretty bad in the trailer. When you watch it in the context of the movie, I don't remember it being that egregious. And there was another thing in that She-Hulk. Somebody told me about this. I didn't actually watch that, but there was like in a trailer, it shows her like throwing a rock further than the Hulk does or something, but it's not as bad in the actual show because then he one-ups her in the show. So it's like the trailers and the marketing and the Zegler doing these press tours, they're like making it out to be worse than it actually the final product is. And it has to be a result of them thinking that this is a good thing because they're stuck in some crazy echo chamber, some Hollywood echo chamber.
I mean, you call it an echo chamber. That's correct. It's a bubble, whatever you want to label it. They don't have outside voices saying, hey, wait a minute. No one's raising their hand in the meeting saying, you know, that line isn't great and it could chase some people away, or it just doesn't help our cause. But I've been covering this for years, where the actors go out in the bully pulpit and they talk to Kimmel and they talk to, Colbert, and they'll say things that are divisive and political and things that they can anger elements of the movie going public. Dude, why are you on Colbert's couch? You're there to promote your movie. You want more people to see it. And by saying that, you're defeating your own purpose. I mean, why did you comb your hair and put on your best suit and travel to New York City and sit there while Stephen Colbert tells dumb jokes? Because you want to promote your movie. That's the gig. So why would you sabotage it? You know, every time Robert De Niro goes out, one of our greatest actors, no problem, and he says, I hate Trump, I hate blah, 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 blah. That never helps his movie. I don't think it helps his movie. I think if you love De Niro as an actor, you may go see his movies. That's perfectly fine. Many people may agree with him. I don't think they're going to get more people to the theater because he bashed Trump for the 1,000th time. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And he can say, listen, there's free speech. He can say whatever he wants. He's not going to get in trouble. It just doesn't make sense if you're a marketing person or you're working on behalf of the marketing team to do that, but they keep doing it.
Yeah, there's a concept that I've wanted to explore with all of this sort of stuff. I haven't really been able to get too deep into it, other than just kind of speculation. But like, I've got to think that there's some incentive structure that's pushing them to do this. Like, could they really be this dense? To think that some of this stuff that they're saying and doing isn't like pushing people away. Like, I feel like it has to have some roots into like the whole ESG sort of system, where they're getting some sort of points on the back end when it comes to like making sure that you push forward this messaging and make sure that you have Dylan Mulvaney pushing your alcoholic beverage to college students.
Come
Like,
on, man.
that's going to lose money, but maybe it's going to increase their ESG score on the back end. I'm not entirely sure, pure speculation, but I feel like there's got to be something like that.
Part of the reason they do what they do, it's a signal to their peers. It's saying, hey, I'm like you. I believe the same things you believe. I'm spreading the good word. Hire me next time. And that's not my thought. That's actually Nick Searcy, who is that rare, bare-knuckled conservative in Hollywood, a very talented actor. I've met him, and he's nice to me. He's two-fisted on social media, of course. But he said that's basically them jockeying for position, saying, hire me for my next gig because I think like you do. It's messaging to each other. And I think the bottom line, if you're a De Niro, you're a legend, you're an Oscar winner, you know that tomorrow your phone will keep on ringing with new gigs and new possibilities. So you really don't care if your next movie or your current movie does well at the box office. There's no skin in it for you. He just knows he's going to be employed in perpetuity. And he should be, because he's a great actor. But I don't think they care. I don't think they have a vested interest in this movie succeeding, so much so that they're going to put aside their preferences and their political peccadillos and say, I'm just going to talk about the movie. De Niro gave a speech at an award show recently, and Apple, the studio behind The Killers of the Flower Moon, said, can you tone down the anti-Trump stuff? We want to focus on the movie. And if you're Apple, of course, that's what you want to focus on. And De Niro said, bleep you, I'm talking about Trump. And so he doesn't care. He doesn't care.
Yeah, Trump broke a lot of people's brains. Regular people, but especially Hollywood and our media, completely broke them down. They still can't get over it. Trump derangement syndrome is a real medical condition.
Yeah,
and it seems to be contagious and even more. It digs in there even better than COVID, it seems. But
just a quick aside, Sage Steele is a sports pundit. And I heard recently that she was told by ESPN not to be critical of Leah Thomas, the trans swimmer who caused all those headlines recently. And I'm thinking, okay, so ESPN, this big major company, is willing to say to one of its employees, shut up, we don't want that opinion out there. And yet for the vast majority of progressive opinions, there's no higher up saying, don't do that, don't say that.
Yeah, it's true. And again, it's the ideological bubble. I mean, and it's so they don't know that their stuff stinks. I mean, you have to believe that so many, including Bob Iger, would look at some of these productions and think, oh, this isn't going to be a surefire smash hit. Certainly the writers think so. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about, with you, Christian, about my thesis that there's a talent drain that's been happening in Hollywood, but especially after one, Trump broke people's brains. Two, the Me Too movement and Time's Up and all of that got to be honest, got a little bit out of hand, if not more than a little bit out of hand, and destroyed careers. One of them being John Lasseter, the genius of Pixar, who basically made the Disney Corporation, I don't know, $20 billion over his career at that studio, and he got shit canned because he was a little bit too huggy with some people that made them uncomfortable. Now, fine. But now Lasseter has left Disney. So that's a very, very important creative mind that is no longer in the building. Reportedly, a lot of the other people that used to work with him left as well. Plus you have, as people in the comments here are mentioning, you have your DEI and ESG mandates, which means, you can't hire somebody with experience to take over an executive role or a executive creative role at a studio if they happen to be middle-aged and white and male, which, that person may have a lot of experience, but they're not going to be hired for that job. Instead, it must be filled by somebody younger, somebody diverse, and
Mhm.
certainly after the Me Too Time's Up movement, somebody who's female. Now, it may turn out that you hire good people by meeting those criteria as well, but there's also a good chance that you will not hire somebody with talent. And so, we're going to get to some of your recommendations from this year and maybe coming up for next year. But I watched, because the trailer looked intriguing, a show on Hulu called A Murder at the End of the World. And it was kind of sold as some kind of like millennial or Gen Z, murder mystery, kind of like Murder on the Orient Express, but with a Gen Z perspective and technology and all this stuff. It was probably the worst show. I think it was 8 episodes. The worst show I've ever seen. It was so bad. Talk about hate watching. I would watch it and just wait for the cliches. I predicted about 7 plot points, and I couldn't believe how cliched and terrible the characters were. Both the main characters were so unlikable, and they were made intentionally ugly. And because these actors obviously are good-looking people, they made them intentionally ugly, and you see it. That they're doing this because they're trying to push the message and the social change that beauty is some kind of objective thing that was created by the patriarchy and doesn't matter. We can have a protagonist who is completely unlikable and also hard to look at the same time, and purposely made so. And so I thought that show, nobody should watch it. It's terrible. But I just thought I watched it all the way through because I thought it was going to, and it did, kind of encapsulate modern Hollywood. You have people who don't have any talent. They can't write a good story with story beats. They certainly can't write a mystery. I figured the whole thing out in about 10 minutes into the first episode. It was absurd. But I really think that we are going to have to count on directors like the Godzilla -1 director. We're going to have to count on shows like from Korea and movies from Korea. Parasite, of course, was a great film. Squid Game was a very entertaining series. We're going to have to count on this stuff because other countries don't destroy their studios and fill them with talentless hacks. They actually have people who are there on merit. There's not a lot of diversity, I don't think, in the Japanese film industry. And they don't, I'm pretty sure it's all Japanese people. And they're also the talented ones rise to the top and produce things that everybody will enjoy.
When you think about DEI and all these different initiatives for more diversity, and you think, well, how does that hurt Disney? I mean, they're employing animators and people who have specialties in storytelling. I got 2 words for you: Claudine Gay. Claudine Gay is the head of Harvard. She is clearly a hack. She is a plagiarist. She has no business being anywhere near at the tippy top of the Ivy Leagues. And yet there she is. Don't you think that's happening in Disney and other movie studios as well? I guarantee it's happening there. And by the way, if you want more diversity, then Disney should throw a whole bunch of money at schools, or maybe look at the inner city school system and say, here we have this new program. It's for emerging filmmakers. And then people of color can join it. And then the people who have talent can rise up, join the Hollywood system. And all of a sudden, we've got these great new voices who might happen to be Black or Latino or anything. That would be great. That would be a great way to address diversity issues. Give people who haven't gotten a chance, the talent, the skill, the education, and see if they rise to the top. And then pluck them out of that school and say, that person's going to direct the next Marvel movie. And he or she is going to kill it because they've been trained and they know what they're doing, and they've got vision and they've got talent. That would be wonderful. But instead, you're having this other system where it's just checking the boxes. And the results, well, you see movies like Wish, and it's not good.
Yeah, I wonder if even that is like, I mean, that sounds better than probably what's going on, but like, it seems like even that might still like not give us the results that we're hoping for. I don't know, because like there's a handful of directors. I'm gonna blank on all of their names, but that they did like 1 or 2 like pretty big movies or good movies, successful movies, and then they were taken and thrown behind the helm of some large thing like a Star Wars product, and then they just got like eaten by the machine. I think like Ryan Johnson did like 2 movies, Looper and like Gold or something like that, before he was thrown behind Last Jedi, and he was just eaten by the machine. And then there was the one guy that ended up doing Fantastic Four, Josh Trank, I think is his name. He did like 1 or 2 movies, small scale, low budget things. Then he was eaten by the machine and spit out the other side, And then there was another one that did, he was the first director on Rogue One before they switched it to the other guy. that again, he did like one movie. I think he did like Godzilla or something like that. And then he got eaten by the machine. So I think like the studio machine, whether, it's like the room of bureaucrats that are deciding on how to actually fine tune this stuff to appeal to the most people or whatever, that kind of eats away at the director's vision or anything like that. I feel like that in itself is something that will just like destroy kind of the creativity that like Jim is seeking in kind of the younger generation.
I don't disagree with that, but I would mention a couple of different examples where it worked out well. Was the Russo brothers. They had done You, Me, and Dupree, and I think they directed some Community episodes, and they were handed the keys to the Captain America, might have been, I don't know if it was Civil War or Winter Soldier. And then they made a whole bunch of really good MCU movies. And I think his name is John Cooper. He did a movie called Cop Car with Kevin Bacon. And now he's been directing the Spider-Man films, which have been mostly very good. So it can work out.
Right.
I don't mind them using that as almost like in baseball, the minor leagues, plucking the guy up and saying, okay, you got your chance to shine, kid. But like you said, sometimes they do get eaten up by the machine and spat out. Like Chloe Zhao, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, won the Oscar for Nomadland, and then she did the Eternals, which no one liked. So, but she's a good director.
Who are the two brothers that did the Lego movie? I can't think of their name.
Lloyd or
yeah, I don't know.
Miller. I'm bouncing around it, but
yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
The two guys that did the Lego movie, huge successful movie. And then again, they got eaten by the Lucasfilm machine when they tried to do Solo. And what have they done since? I'm not entirely sure. But so it just seems like the industry itself has a way of just like crushing the spirit of some of these people.
Phil Lord and Christopher Miller.
Lord and Miller, that's it.
That's right.
The writer strike stuff, because I kind of want to look forward. We can do your best and worst of the year towards the end of the episode. But looking forward, we talked about the big ships that it takes a while for these things to turn around. I mean, Jim has talked about some of these scripts that were written during the height of the Trump era that are still making their way through the system, that still have all that lingering, Trump derangement syndrome stuff built into the foundations of it. But I'm curious, and we also talked about whether or not these studios are learning anything, big budgets, all of that sort of stuff. But I want to look forward to the kind of next year, because this year, I don't know, maybe 2023 will be looked as the year of the box office bomb, and maybe everything will get better afterwards. But it seems like those corrections, even if they take a while to correct themselves or be corrected, it might take even longer, considering that we had several months of writers and actors strikes that prolonged everything. Everything got pushed out and delayed and whatever. They're trying to fill a content gap now, so they're going to postpone certain things. So do you have any insight or thoughts on kind of the strikes that were going on, whether or not that they were warranted, or how they kind of came to an agreement, anything like that?
Well, it seems like 2024 is going to struggle because there's not going to be as much product coming our way. So that's going to have an impact on the box office. Whether it was warranted or not, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like some of the writers' requests that were approved of, I don't agree with. I mean, they wanted more people in the writer's room. That seems like an arbitrary checklist. I don't like that. Some writer's room can have a whole bunch of people. Some could have just one person, and he or she could be, doing a great job. So I'm not a big fan of that. I think it put more economic pressure on Hollywood, and I think you're seeing more belt tightening, not just Disney. Other streamers are cutting shows before they even get to the public. I mean, I just watched a new Netflix special with Ricky Gervais, and it crushes the whole woke ideology. It says things that are inappropriate, and Netflix is standing by him. And Netflix will put out a new Dave Chappelle special in a couple of days as well. So I think Netflix is saying, hey, in the past, we would have canceled this, we would have censored this, we would have not supported this, we would apologize for it, but we need those eyeballs, we need those views. So we're going to just, come on, Ricky, come on, Dave, we want you to be there. So I think you're seeing more of that. So yeah, I mean, we'll have to wait and see what happens, but the fallout may take a while to really get the full impact.
Yeah, that's another benefit of kind of that really fractured kind of media landscape, is that if there's 3 companies, it's very easy for them to all be in agreement with what will be acceptable and what will be allowed content on their, media outlets. But if there's like a million of them out there, and you have Netflix that are standing behind, content creators like Dave Chappelle, or even a more extreme example where it's like the Daily Wire has like, yeah, you know what, maybe we're going to start making movies and produce movies and shows and all of that. It's just like, well, no one's going to tell them what they can and can't put on their streaming service. So, that's a good thing.
And by the way, if you're Netflix, you could say, I can embrace a Ricky Gervais and realize that I'm going to get a lot of eyeballs, maybe some negative attention, but mostly it'll work out at an economic point of view. Or I could, if I'm Ricky Gervais, I can say, well, Netflix turned me down. I'm going to go to rickygervais.com, assuming he has that URL, and I'm going to sell it myself. And I'm going to make so much money, because we're seeing that again and again and again. A lot of these comedians are going through YouTube or Patreon. Louis C.K., after he was canceled for doing just gross things in front of women. When you read the details, it's as nasty as possible. But he said, you know what? If the fans forgive me, I'm going to reach out to them directly. And he's had a very successful career now, completely outside of Hollywood. He sold out Madison Square Garden earlier this year. That's amazing. And you could hate what he did. I certainly hate what he did. But does he deserve to never work again? I don't think so. And if you're able to forgive him and think he's funny, then you'll go see him. So I think these big platforms like, well, I could, play with the woke mindset and cancel these people, or I could benefit from it. And I think Netflix has been very shrewd, where they've got some woke programming here and then they got Dave Chappelle there. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to one last time hit the point that's in my show notes, and it's you mentioned Ricky Gervais. He's Generation X. You and I are Gen Xers. Donnie is probably, I would call him an early millennial. I could make him honorary Gen X if he would accept it. That's fine with me.
No way. I'm solid with millennials.
Yeah. So, but our generation, Christian, we had directors and creators like Kevin Smith, Quentin Tarantino, Spike Lee, Jon Favreau. They created, you should probably already give Quentin Tarantino a Lifetime Achievement Award for what he did for and to Hollywood with his unique vision as a director. Favreau created the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe with his brilliant casting and handling of Robert Downey Jr. in a fantastic story. So billions of dollars were made by Disney because Jon Favreau was a good filmmaker before he was given the keys to that franchise. Where are the Gen Z and early millennials? Where are these creatives? They should be. Where is the Gen Z Quentin Tarantino? Where's the Gen Z Kevin Smith? I don't see them, Christian. And you look at this obviously more closely than I do, but it makes me think we may be in for a very long generational creative gap in Hollywood, because these young people are not taught, and they just don't have the talent, as far as I can see, because I'm not seeing anything like we got to experience when we were in our 20s with our contemporaries in Hollywood.
It's a great question, and it made me really think. And I've been, since you emailed back and forth about it, I'm trying to think of some names, and the few that come to mind often are in the horror genre. Ari Aster is young-ish. I'm not sure his exact age. I think Robert Eggers, I think he's young-ish, but he could be in his 40s too, the people I'm mentioning. Damien Leone, he's behind the Terrifier franchise, and it's so wildly disgusting, and I love it, and I'm embarrassed to say so, but there it is. But I think he does a lot with a little when it comes to his budget. So I could see him doing different stories, different horror movies in the next few years. That could be exciting. But you're right. I'm trying to think of like 20-somethings who are real visionaries, or even early 30-somethings. I'm not getting names. I think that the Safdie brothers, who have worked with Adam Sandler, they seem youngish, and just compared to the Coppolas and all the sort of the old guard. But yeah, no, it's a great question. There should be these young, vibrant forces who are full of energy and moxie, who are going to, challenge the status quo and make exciting movies. And even when they swing and miss, you think, oh gosh, they're onto something. Right. The next movie will be their next step. And there may be examples, and maybe I'm drawing a blank here, but I don't think there are too many obvious examples in this regard. Right. So it's a great point.
I'm looking at an IMDb list right now of popular millennial directors, and literally the only name that I recognize is Ryan Coogler. and even he is born in 1986. So
Yeah, he's a
I'm waiting.
talented filmmaker for sure.
I'm looking for like, the Kevin Smith, who like by the
Mhm.
time he was 30 had like 3 cult classics under his belt.
Mhm.
So
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Robert Eggers is 40 years old, so I don't know what
Yeah,
generation.
so I'm scrambling. I'm trying to think, but it's
yeah.
hard. And
Well,
I think that it's rare for someone in their early 20s to be so fully formed as an artist. And we've seen that time and time again. Authors, filmmakers, they just had it at that young age. But I often think that it takes a little maturity to be able to tell stories and have the psychological complexity that films need. But there are exceptions where people just get it very young. They're phenoms.
right. So we're already at the hour mark, but I do want to kind of go through some of the best and worst
Sure.
of the previous year, according to you. Let's start with the bad end first.
Sure.
What were just some notable stinkers when it comes to the box office that come to mind?
You People, which is featured in that image there, boy, I just had this love for Eddie Murphy. I grew up with him. I just think he's endlessly talented. I think that for the last, gosh, maybe 20 years, we haven't really tapped that talent. And that's partially his fault. He's not picking the right projects. But You People is an interracial romance comedy. So many false notes, so many cringeworthy moments, so many awkward exchanges. And through it all, Eddie Murphy does shine through a time or two, but not enough to recommend it. It's a very bad movie. I also hated Saltburn. I know it's getting all this award season buzz. It's another I Hate the Rich movie, which I'm okay with. I hate some rich people too. And I thought that last year's movie, The Menu, which had a very similar theme, Hate the Rich, was really good. If you haven't seen that, definitely check that out. But Saltburn, the psychological portraits don't make any sense. There's a lot of shock moments that are just shocking, but who cares? They're not interesting. And it just gets worse as it goes along. And then finally, The Blackening, which annoyed me because the whole gimmick behind The Blackening, which was a horror comedy hybrid, was why do the black people always die first in horror movies? But they don't.
That's funny.
And there was a
That's a funny
website that
concept.
tracked. Yeah, it's a fake news concept. And again, you can make that your marketing shtick and then make a good movie. It was awful. I took my son to see it. He loves horror movies, and we just sat stone faced.
Well, that's like a stereotype, like a meme or whatever from like 20 plus years ago. Like they made jokes about that, like in the first Scream movie. Like that's not something that like pertains to modern day. I don't think.
And also, I think the movies that I grew up on, the 70s and 80s, those horror movies, there was so little diversity, and Hollywood was doing such a bad job of giving all people a chance. They were just a bunch of white people, honestly. So I mean, even from that perspective, from a woke perspective, it doesn't make any sense. But the movie itself was just flat out bad, awful.
Well, and so I wanted to, have you talk about the bad movies so that we could end on a good note, because surely there is some good stuff out there. We've talked about all of these movies, box office bombs, the state of Hollywood itself, and all of that stuff. It seems like all just terrible news, but there's got to be some gems in that coal mine there. What do we got for the good movies of 2023?
Gems is maybe overstating it, but these are some good films. The Holdovers, Paul Giamatti, a wonderful bittersweet comedy drama, and I believe it's available either today or tomorrow on Peacock. So if you missed it in theaters, you missed it on video on demand, I believe it's going to be available on Peacock, which is a solid streaming service. So you could check that out there very soon. I really enjoyed Godzilla -1. It just was a throwback film. It actually reminded me of Top Gun Maverick in weird ways. I wrote about that at Hollywood and Toto, by the way. If you want to check out some of the comparisons, it's interesting. Really enjoyed Air, which is a shocking ode to capitalism and the American dream from Hollywood, from Ben Affleck, Mr. Liberal. So good for them. It's a very charming movie, well told, great cast, like that one. And just one is a bit of a sleeper, I think. It's called Reopening, and it's a Blaze Media production. I don't think they made it. I think they bought it and they released it. It's like Waiting for Guffman, which was that theatrical comedy with that old troupe with Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara. But this time it's a less than talented troupe trying to put on a show during COVID. And it's all about the restrictions they had to endure and follow. And it's a very smart satire of how crazy we all were. At the same time, it's sweet, it's lovable, and it's funny. I laughed a lot. So Reopening, if you haven't seen that, check it out. Blaze Media.
Jim, you have got to run in like 45 seconds. Any last comments or questions for our guest here?
No, definitely go to hollywoodintoto.com. That way you can get all of Christian's great recommendations. And Christian, old buddy, it's good to have you on the pod again.
Yeah,
Really enjoyed it.
I'll see y'all next year.
Yeah, exactly. Right. All right. Everyone, thank you for tuning into this episode of the In the Tank podcast. Please, if you're an audio only listener, leave a review for us on iTunes. It'd be greatly appreciated. Also, if you're catching the show on a Friday or later, if you're an audio only listener, you can catch the show a day earlier on Thursdays at noon Central Time, where we are streaming on Facebook and YouTube and Rumble and X. And, if you could do a couple of things that will help out the show by just hitting that like button, commenting, subscribing if you haven't already, sharing this content, all things that won't cost you more than just a couple of seconds, but helps break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. If you'd like, you could follow us on Twitter or X at In The Tank Pod. And if you have any comments or suggestions for the show, feel free to email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At Jay Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always visit heartland.org.
And Christian Toto, once again, where can people go to see your work?
Well, just go to hollywoodintoto.com and the Hollywood Toto podcast. And you can follow me on Twitter at Hollywood in Toto.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.
He's a lion, dog-faced pony soldier.